Before the story begins, subscribe to African Heart Stories so we can bring you more powerful African stories. And where from you are watching, tell in comments. The city woke before the sun had fully opened its eyes. Tall glass buildings caught the early light and threw it back like proud mirrors, while just beyond them, dusty paths still slept under the feet of history. Here, shiny cars moved fast on smooth roads, yet a few steps away, cracked earth remembered bare feet, wooden sandals, and long journeys made with nothing but hope. This was a land where old footprints had not faded, even when new roads tried to cover them. Progress stood tall, but it stood on soil that had carried pain, prayers, and patience for generations. When the wind moved across the red earth, it did not move alone. It carried whispers, soft voices of those who had walked before. Elders said the land never forgets its children. The ground listens. The trees remember. Even when people close their ears to the past watches them quietly. In this land, ancestors were not gone. They rested in the soil, in the wind, in the stories told by firelight. It was believed that when a person walked with pride too high, the ancestors leaned closer to see where his feet would stumble. Among the living stood a man the city admired deeply. He was young, African, and rich beyond measure. Once, his stomach had known hunger, and his nights had known cold. Now, he sat in rooms where air was cooled by machines and food arrived before desire was spoken. People spoke his name with respect. He rose from nothing, they said. He is proof that hard work changes destiny. Newspapers praised his success, and gatherings welcomed him like royalty. Yet, behind the applause, few remembered the hands that fed him last, when there was almost nothing left to eat. To the world, his story was clean and bright. He spoke of struggle, yes, but softly, carefully. He trimmed away the shame, the tears, the nights his mother slept hungry so he could eat. He reshaped his past until it fit the rooms he now entered. Sometimes, when he stood alone, the truth knocked inside his chest. He felt it when he looked at his fine clothes and remembered the patched ones he once wore. Shame crept quietly, like a shadow at sunset, reminding him that some roots were buried, not removed. Wealth crowned him, but pride held the crown tight. He walked with confidence, laughed with power, and listened closely to the praise of the elite. Their approval fed him almost as much as money did. Elders would have warned him. When pride walks ahead of wisdom, the road ends suddenly. But he had learned to silence old warnings. In his world, respect came from success, not humility. By his side walked a woman, shaped by comfort and order. She was educated, polished, and admired. Her life had known structure, not survival. To him, she was more than love. She was proof that he belonged among the admired. When she smiled at him, he saw the man he wanted the world to see. Through her eyes, his past felt farther away, smaller, almost unreal. Her family welcomed him warmly, but their eyes weighed everything. They measured worth by appearance, by name, by standing. Reputation was their language, and honor was public, not private. Each visit, each meeting, tightened the rope around his hidden truth. He felt it but smiled through it, unaware that the land beneath him was already listening, already remembering, already preparing to speak. Far from the noise of the city, where horns argued with the morning and glass buildings blocked the sky, an old woman still bent to the earth. Her village rested quietly between hills, its houses shaped from mud and memory. Each dawn found her lifting her hoe before the sun fully rose, her back curved like a question the world never answered. She dug, planted, and carried firewood with hands hardened by years of labor. Sweat traced lines down her face, mixing with red dust, yet her lips often moved in silent prayer. When neighbors greeted her, she smiled gently. "Mother, rest a little," the young woman once said. The old woman shook her head. "If the earth rests, hunger wakes," she replied softly. Her days were heavy, but her love was heavier. Every strike of the hoe carried memories of a small boy she once fed with her last meal. She worked not for herself alone, but for a future she believed in. Even when it no longer stood beside her, those same hands that had built a future now trembled in poverty. They had washed clothes by the river, cooked over weak fires, and wiped tears from a hungry child's face. Now they shook as she tied firewood with rope. In African lands, a mother's hands are sacred. They hold tomorrow before it is born, yet no gold returned to rest in her palms. The debt of love remained unpaid, hanging in the air like an unanswered call. Miles away, in a city wrapped in comfort, her son prepared for a journey. He stood before a mirror, adjusting his clothes, his reflection calm, but his heart restless. His fiancée watched him with a smile. "Your family will be happy to meet me," she said. "Yes," he answered quickly, then paused. "They are simple people." As plans were made, fear walked beside them. His thoughts ran ahead to the village he had left behind. What if the past spoke too loudly? What if the truth stood where he could not hide it? He told himself the visit was right, yet honesty felt dangerous. Between intention and truth, his heart pulled in two directions. As the car moved, memories rose like smoke. He remembered sleeping on the floor, sharing food meant for one. He remembered his mother's voice at night, whispering prayers into the dark. The elders always said truth walks beside every traveler, even when denied. With every mile his chest tightened, knowing some meetings cannot be avoided. At the edge of the road, an old man sat beneath a tree, watching the passing world. He tapped his walking stick and spoke as if to the wind. A tree that forgets its roots will fall when storms come. The words drifted after the car as it disappeared into the dust. Somewhere, the ancestors listened. Fate did not rush. It waited, patient and silent, watching the road where past and present were about to meet. The rich man shifted in his seat. As the car moved deeper into the land that had once raised him, the smooth road slowly gave way to dust, and the air changed. Trees he once climbed as a boy stood quietly, watching him pass. Small houses appeared, their walls made of mud and memory. His chest tightened. These sights were too familiar. They spoke of hunger, of torn clothes, of nights when sleep came without food. He adjusted his expensive jacket, as if cloth could protect him from memory. Wealth had built walls around his body, but it could not silence the voice of the past knocking inside his heart. "Are you okay?" his fiancée asked gently, noticing his unease. "Yes," he replied quickly, forcing a smile. "Just tired." But his eyes kept moving, afraid that the land itself might call his name. The car slowed suddenly. "There's someone ahead," the driver said, by the roadside. A bent figure struggled forward. The car rolled closer, almost against the rich man's will, his breath caught in his throat. Fate had placed its hand on the brake. The woman ahead carried a heavy bundle of firewood on her back. Each step was slow, measured, painful. Her feet were dusty, her clothes worn thin by years of work. The world seemed to hold its breath as the car approached her. The woman shifted the load slightly, wincing. Sweat ran down her face, but she did not complain. Firewood pressed into her shoulders like the weight of many years. She was endurance shaped into flesh, motherhood wrapped in silence. Every stick on her back told a story of meals cooked, nights survived, children raised with nothing but love and faith. These were unpaid sacrifices, stacked one upon another. As the car drew near, the woman lifted her head. Her eyes met his. In that instant, blood recognized blood before words could be spoken. Her heart jumped. Time folded in on itself. She saw the boy she once carried on her back, now sitting behind dark glass. Her hands trembled, but she steadied herself. She did not wave. She did not cry out. Dignity held her still. Pain lived in her eyes, but her lips stayed sealed. A mother's heart broke quietly. Inside the car, the fiancé leaned forward. "Who is that woman?" she asked. "She looks like she needs help." Silence fell thick and heavy. The rich man's mouth went dry. The road, the trees, even the wind seemed to wait. His mind raced. Truth stood before him, naked and demanding. He could feel the weight of Ice's fiancée, said the drivers, and unseen ancestors who never blink. He thought of meetings, of respect, of how the elite would look at him if they knew. Fear rose higher than love. Shame spoke louder than honor. "I don't know her," he said at last. The words dropped like a stone on sacred ground. The driver nodded slowly and moved the car forward. Dust rose behind them, settling on the old woman's feet. She stood still, firewood still on her back, watching the car disappear. Her knees weakened, but she did not fall. She whispered to herself, almost too softly to hear. "So this is how the road ends." Inside the car, the rich man stared ahead, his heart pounding. He had chosen the mask of wealth over the truth of blood. Somewhere behind them, the land remembered. And somewhere ahead, fate began to walk faster. The old woman remained where the dust had settled, firewood still pressing against her back. Her lips did not tremble. No tears fell. Yet her heart broke so loudly that even the silent trees seemed to hear it. In African lands, pain does not always cry. Sometimes it sits quietly and grows heavy. She stood tall in her suffering, carrying it the way she had carried hunger, fear, and love for many years. Without protest, her eyes followed the road where the car had disappeared, and then slowly, she lowered her gaze to the earth that had never denied her. From nearby fields and small huts, eyes had watched everything. A woman fetching water stopped mid-step. A young boy herding goats froze. An old man leaning on his stick shook his head slowly. The village had seen the rich man pass. They had seen the firewood fall slightly as recognition struck the old woman. They had seen the car move on without mercy. In villages like this, nothing disappears. What the eyes see, the heart stores. What the heart stores, the tongue eventually speaks. That day, memory planted a seed. By evening, voices began to travel like smoke between houses. Did you see him? One asked. Yes, another replied. He looked through her like she was dust. So wealth has eaten gratitude. A third whispered. They spoke softly, but their words were sharp. People remembered how the woman had raised her son alone. They remembered nights she begged grain from neighbors. Now, they spoke of pride that kills humility and money that blinds. The heart, a moral imbalance, was named, even before elders spoke it aloud. When night came, the elders gathered beneath the old tree where judgment often rested. Their voices were low, respectful of forces older than themselves. A man who cuts his roots invites the wind, one elder said. Another nodded. Disrespect to a mother does not sleep. It wakes ancestors. They did not curse loudly. They did not shout. They spoke the way fate listens quietly. Ancestral anger was not rushed. It was patient. Far away. In comfort, the rich man sat in silence. He told himself the lie again and again. I had no choice. I was protecting my future. He remembered the eyes of his fiancée, the world he had entered, the throne he feared losing. It was necessary, he whispered to his reflection, but pride stood guard over his heart, blocking guilt from fully entering. Still, fear leaked through the cracks, stealing his peace. His fiancée noticed the change. He spoke less. His smile felt forced. At dinner, she finally asked, "You've been quiet since we left the village? Is something wrong?" He looked away. "Nothing," he said too quickly. Her heart did not accept the answer. Silence stretched between them, heavy and uncomfortable. Trust, once firm, began to crack. She felt it, the sense that the man beside her was hiding something deeper than words. Meanwhile, the old woman walked home alone. Each step felt heavier than the last. Firewood pressed into her shoulders, but shame pressed into her soul. Children greeted her along the path. She smiled faintly, unwilling to spread her pain. When she reached her hut, she leaned the wood against the wall and sat down slowly. In the quiet, she whispered, "I carried him all my life. Now I carry this." The night listened. The village remembered, and the road that had witnessed denial prepared itself for what was yet to come. The village sat under the weight of the sun, quiet but restless. Tradition and modern pride seemed to stand on opposite sides of the dusty road, each waiting for the other to bow. The old woman, once tireless, moved slowly. Now her shoulders ached under firewood, and her legs trembled as if the years of sacrifice were finally catching up to her. She stooped over the earth with the weight of decades pressing on her back. Her hands, once steady, shook slightly as she arranged sticks for the evening fire. She was a lamp burning low, a light that had kept her family alive but now flickered against the wind. Her pain was not in her voice. It lived quietly in her chest, a fire unspoken yet fierce. The villagers had learned long ago that suffering need not cry to be known. Silence could carry more truth than tears. She had endured hunger, storms, and sleepless nights for the child who now denied her. And she endured again, holding her grief and dignity that only the long-suffering know. She paused, resting her hands on her knees, and whispered to the red earth beneath her, "Have I given all my blood only for it to be forgotten?" Her words were more question than accusation, yet they cut sharper than poverty ever could. Motherhood felt suspended in the air, tested by betrayal. She remembered the boy she had carried on her back, the boy she had fed when there was nothing, the boy she had prayed for in silence. And now, her heart ached with a new hunger for acknowledgement, for love, for the truth to be seen. From their homes and fields, the villagers began to gather. They spoke softly at first, voices carried by curiosity, then rising with indignation. "Did you see him?" one asked. He acted as if she were invisible. Another replied, "It is not only his mother, it is all of us who watched this happen," an elder said, voice steady, carrying the weight of years. The elders moved carefully among them, their presence commanding both respect and fear. They spoke of balance broken and ancestors unsettled. When a son denies the blood that gave him life, the spirits do not sleep. One said, "The balance of this village shifts like a river after the rains." Restless ancestors watch. They remember what is denied and will call it back. Their words were not threats, but truths older than the hills. Reminders that dishonor to her mother stirs forces patient and certain, even as the rich man justified his denial, telling himself it was necessary to protect his standing. The village felt the moral scales tilt. The elders warned, without raising their voices. The air itself seemed heavy with judgment. Disrespect to a mother never sleeps. One whispered, not to the rich man, not to the children, but to the winds, knowing that fate listens and remembers. And so, the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the red earth. Tradition and pride faced each other silently across the dusty road. The lamp of a mother's strength flickered. The memory of her suffering settled into the hearts of all who had seen, and the quiet knowledge lingered. The day of reckoning was coming, and no wealth, no mask, could turn it away. The city glimmered in the late afternoon sun, glass towers reflecting light like trophies. But behind the polished walls, cracks began to form in a throne built on denial. The billionaire's empire, once admired for its grandeur, started showing its fragile underpinnings. Deals that seemed unshakable faltered. Partners hesitated before signing contracts. Rumors whispered of a man who smiled at the world but hid shadows behind his eyes. Wealth had been his armor, yet without the roots of honor and truth, even the strongest fortress trembled. At a high-rise meeting, a loyal executive lowered his gaze. "Sir, the agreement cannot move forward. There are concerns." He nodded, but his usual confidence faltered. "I will handle it," he said, though the words felt hollow. The next days brought more challenges. Deals collapsed quietly. Loyal hands withdrew, and business partners who once praised him moved to the edge. Was hesitant to touch a name now clouded with unspoken doubts. The community began to murmur. Reputation, once shining, started to tarnish like iron in rain. At night, he could not sleep. Guilt haunted him as footsteps of memory echoed through his mind. He remembered nights of hunger, the pangs of his own childhood, the prayers whispered by a mother who had carried him on tired shoulders. Faces from the past appeared uninvited in his dreams. Small hands reaching for bread that wasn't there, eyes full of trust, a mother kneeling in the firelight, sweat tracing paths down her back. Every memory pressed on him, relentless and sharp. Beside him, his fiancée steadied him with growing unease. The laughter that had once followed him now faltered. Her admiration began to crack. "Something is not right," she said softly, her voice carrying across the room. He smiled, but the smile no longer convinced her. Silence filled the space between them, louder than any argument, heavier than any confrontation. In the quiet moments, he held money in his hands, counted gold, reviewed accounts, and yet it felt empty. Each coin clinked like a hollow echo. Success, without honor and truth, had lost its sweetness. The riches that had once promised security now could not silence the conscience that had awakened. Sweat, prayers, in the memory of calloused hands, the toil of a mother who had given all, haunted him more than any creditor or rival. Every fortune he had gained could not restore what had been denied. Every luxury, every applause, rang false against the rhythm of his own guilt. The city lights shimmered outside, but inside, he felt smaller than he had ever been. The throne he had built on denial was no longer a place of power. It was a cage, and the ghosts of the past were its true rulers. The sun had climbed high, but the village no longer moved in quiet patience. Whispers that had once curled softly through the huts now grew sharp, urgent, impossible to ignore. The day had come when the village could no longer keep silence. Eyes that had watched from windows, doorways, and behind trees gathered like a river swelling beyond its banks. The truth, carried in the memories of those who had seen the rich man pass his mother by, began to rise. Every hand that had worked alongside the mother, every child who had noticed her struggle, now spoke it quietly, then louder, until the silence shattered. Voices turned into words. First, soft murmurs of what they had seen. Then, courage found its way through fear. "He denied her," one man said. "Do you see how he passed her like a stranger?" a woman whispered. An old trader shook his head. "We watched him, all of us. And now it must be said." The elders listened, leaning on carved sticks that bore their authority. They had waited for the right moment, and now it had arrived. The words of the people became more than rumor. They became fact. Denial could no longer find shelter behind wealth or charm. The past had caught up with the present. A voice rose, clear and unshaken. "She is his mother," it said. The words cut through the crowd like a drumbeat, echoing across the red earth. For the first time, the mother's name was spoken without fear, without hesitation. Sacred blood, unrecognized for so long, was finally acknowledged in the open air. The rich man's face, usually so controlled, shifted as the lie he had built so carefully stood naked before the people. Pride melted, leaving only a pale mask of shame. "No, that is not true," he whispered, but the words were swallowed by the murmuring crowd. The truth had a voice louder than denial, sharper than any wealth, more enduring than any title. He was called forward, the weight of the village and his own conscience pressing down. There was no turning back, no retreat into towers of glass or corridors of money. He had to stand where the truth of his life had been buried, where the sacrifices of the woman who had carried him, literally and figuratively, could no longer be hidden. And there she stood, bent with years of labor, hands worn and strong, eyes tired yet unbroken. The villagers saw her in the fullness of her endurance, the truth of her sacrifices laid bare. Every night spent without bread, every ache endured in silence, every prayer whispered into the wind now had witness. Her pain, long carried privately, became undeniable in the light of day. The rich man's eyes flickered between her and the crowd. He had built castles of gold, but none could shield him from this truth. The heart, he realized, would always know honor greater than gold. The elders stepped forward, their presence commanding silence, like the slow drumbeat of an ancestral song. Their eyes, lined with years of wisdom and memories older than any city, scanned the gathered crowd. "Hear this," one said, his voice deep and steady, carrying the weight of tradition. "The laws of our people are older than gold. They're whispered by mothers, sung by fathers, and watched over by the spirits of the earth. Respect for one's mother is sacred. To deny her is to break not only the bond of blood, but the balance of life itself." The billionaire's face tightened. Gold and glass could build towers, but here, nothing could shield him. Modern pride collided with ancestral wisdom. His wealth, once a shield against the world, now felt hollow. The murmurs of the elders grew louder, blending with the voices of villagers who had once admired him. "No riches can silence what is right," an elder declared. "No crown can buy forgiveness for the heart it has wronged." The fiancée looked at him, her carefully cultivated respect fading like mist in the morning sun. She had loved the image of a man who could conquer all, but now she saw a man unmasked, trembling before truths he had tried to bury. The crowd's whispers sharpened into judgment. Where once admiration had flowed like the river through the village, it now turned swift and unforgiving against him. The moral authority of the elders outweighed any wealth he had accumulated. Alone, in the middle of it all, his pride began to crack. He felt the weight of every glance, every whispered story, every memory of sacrifice he had ignored. His chest, tight in, his knees weakened, and for the first time, the billionaire felt small. Stripped of power, exposed to the truth of himself, in the quiet of his mind, realization dawned. To deny his mother had been to deny his own soul. Every act of rejection, every lie told to preserve appearances, had not only betrayed her, had fractured him. He sank to the earth, the brilliance of his riches meaningless in the face of ancestral justice. And in that moment, humility, shame, and the first seed of redemption began to root themselves in the heart of a man who had once thought wealth could conquer all. The village held its breath as he stepped forward, the polished shoes and fine suit left behind, like a cloak shed in humility. He approached his mother, not with gold, not with gifts or promises, but with nothing but the weight of his own shame. The road dust clung to his heels, yet it felt lighter than the burden of pride he had carried for so long. The people watched, silently, sensing the change in the era's son, laying down his armor. Finally, facing the truth, he knelt slowly, the knees that had once stood tall with arrogance, now bending before the woman who had given him life. "Mother," he said, his voice trembling, "it is I, your son. Forgive me for the years I have denied you." The gesture spoke more than any treasure ever could. It was the African way of humility, a bow to both parent and the spirits. They watched over the village. The villagers leaned closer as he claimed her publicly. No hesitation, no whisper. "She is my mother," he declared, lifting his eyes to meet theirs, to meet the elders who had spoken of laws older than gold. The truth had been restored in the eyes of the people, and with it, the fragile honor that pride had once shattered. A pause followed, thick and solemn. His mother's eyes, rimmed with tears, reflected pain that had gathered over decades. She said nothing at first, her silence echoing the depth of her suffering. "Forgiveness," she reminded him, and the crowd was not a gift to be rushed. It was a path walked carefully, step by step, heart to heart. Then, slowly, she reached out, placing a hand upon his bowed head. Her mercy was not a surrender. It was a strength forged through hardship, love, and endurance. "Stand, my son," she whispered. "You have found the way home, and in your truth, the earth itself smiles." The elders nodded, their faces grave, yet approving as the balance of the ancestors began to return. The community exhaled together, witnessing the healing where shame had once lived. Eyes that had judged now reflected relief. Whispers of ancestral blessing floated on the wind. The sun rose, not as a man measured by wealth or towers, but as one who understood the true measure of life. Honor, gratitude, and respect. He looked at the village, at his mother, and finally understood that wealth was not counted in gold or land, but in the strength of bonds, the courage to admit wrong, and the grace to rebuild what had been broken. The lesson, ancient as the red earth, had been learned. Pride may rise, but only humility and love endure. The son stepped lightly on the familiar earth. The red soil that had once been dust on his bare feet, now warm beneath polished shoes. He looked around at the village that had shaped him, the clay walls of homes. The fields tilled by hands that knew hunger and hope alike. Each step was a prayer of return, each breath a quiet acknowledgement. This soil, these people, this life had never forgotten him, even when he had tried to forget it. He felt the pulse of the land under his palms, the heartbeat of ancestors whispering, "You are home again." Voices rose around him, soft at first, then louder, carrying the warmth of acceptance. Children paused their play, elders straightened their backs, neighbors approached with cautious smiles. "Welcome back," they said, not as judgment but as recognition. His humility had opened the door that pride had once slammed shut. The laughter, the nods, the hands extended in greeting, all spoke of restored harmony, the social bonds mended by truth and courage. He bowed to each in turn, feeling the village fold him into its living memory. Once more an elder stepped forward, leaning on a carved staff, his eyes shining with wisdom and the weight of generations. He raised his voice so all could hear. "A tree that forgets its roots will fall in the storm, but the one that bends to the earth will stand through all seasons. Let this be a lesson to the young and those yet unborn. Wealth is fleeting, pride will crumble, but honor and remembrance give life to the heart of the village." The words settled over the crowd like a gentle rain, carrying with them the eternal truth. The sun had returned, and with him, the balance of earth, family, and soul.